Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to try and catch up with the extraordinary events of yesterday, really, regarding Liz Truss's future, as the Tories were given the clear impression that the Prime Minister was not at all in control, yet they're not getting her to step aside immediately. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, fronted the Sunday morning interviews on behalf of the Cabinet. He then conducted a press conference yesterday morning, which I discussed in my video yesterday. He was then due to give a statement to the House of Commons later on, which he did, and then more interviews in the evening. That sounds like the job of the Prime Minister, doesn't it? At this point, it looked like Jeremy Hunt was the new Prime Minister. He was certainly the one in charge. So Labour decided they want to get the actual Prime Minister to say something. She's not just hiding away in the fridge there. So Keir Starmer tabled an urgent question to ask why the previous Chancellor had been sacked. The urgent question was granted, but rather than Liz Truss turning up to answer it, they sent Penny Mordaunt. Now, this was a little odd. It's not odd that the Prime Minister didn't turn up in general. Like, Prime Ministers don't always answer urgent questions themselves. Sometimes it's more appropriate for another member of the Cabinet to do that. But this question was deliberately designed by Labour to be one that only the Prime Minister could answer. As a result, if anybody else turned up instead of Truss, it would be highly suspicious. It was highly suspicious. And that's what happened. Several MPs asked why the Prime Minister herself was not there to answer it, and Mordaunt responded that she had good reason not to be there. We were wondering if she was booking flights to Ukraine, although with Russia taking pot shots at civilian populations again in desperation, I can't imagine defence chiefs would have been too impressed with that idea. But then, just before the urgent question session ended, Truss came into the chamber. Now, I'll get on to what happened then in a moment, but this was a bizarre move. Mordaunt was trying to claim that Truss had other urgent business on. There's not much business really more urgent than answering Parliament. Parliament is the sovereign power in this country, and the executive act on their behalf. So what this urgent business was that meant she missed the start of the roughly half-hour session, but could be there for the end of it. So people were thinking, well, is there a national or an international emergency brewing? Has Russia launched the nukes? No, not a bit of it. Downing Street later on said she was meeting with Sir Graham Brady, chair of the 1922 committee, in what they called a pre-planned meeting. Cue a load of people going, what on earth does pre-planned even mean? You can plan a meeting. What is pre-planning? But anyway, never mind. There are two things about this. First, that's not urgent. Even if there was a meeting planned, it's not more important than addressing Parliament when you are requested to. This is internal party business, Graham Brady. No, you go to Parliament. But the second thing is, it was a stupid lie, because Brady was in the chamber when the urgent question was taking place. He was right there on the cameras. He did leave about 10 minutes before the end, but that was probably just for a piss or a phone call or something. He certainly wasn't meeting with Liz Truss. So why the lies? And one thing's for certain, though, unless Truss resigns before tomorrow lunchtime or explains why she wasn't there, she is going to be asked at Prime Minister's questions, unless she dodges that as well. But when Truss did come to the chamber, her behaviour was incredibly odd. I'm going to try and put a video of it in the background. Hopefully I remember. I don't always. So you can see for yourself. So as Hunt was giving his statement, Truss was just staring straight ahead, locked-jawed and blinking constantly. Now, I'm not a doctor. That is someone struggling to cope with immense stress, isn't it? What on earth was she in the chamber for at all? She didn't even stay long. It was about a quarter of an hour and then she scurried off, leaving the real head of government to carry on giving his statement and take questions from MPs. Now, I will say at this point, there's a natural reaction to be concerned for someone's health when they behave like that. She's clearly stressed. Very, very stressed. You know, and I do have to say, I struggled to watch because she was clearly in distress, clearly suffering, should not have been there. That being said, my sympathy is limited in her case for a few reasons. First, the source of the stress is that her leadership has failed, but she has to carry on pretending to be Prime Minister. Whether she thinks the time is up or not, or whether she still thinks she can save it, I don't know, but she's clearly under immense pressure because of that. She could just remove herself from that source of stress by resigning, leaving Theresa Coffey, the Deputy Prime Minister, in place, while Tory MPs sort out a replacement. I get that the Tories have probably told her to stay for now, but she doesn't have to pay any attention to them. Her parliamentary career is spectacularly over now. You cannot imagine a future Prime Minister having her even in cabinet or her wanting to be there. So she has a way out. Secondly, she will have access to good mental health medical care should she need it. Now, that's not a reason to wish overwhelming stress on someone, but an ordinary person suffering immense stress from work would have neither the recourse to leave because they need the money, nor mental health care accessible in all probability because provision is extremely poor in the UK. Third, she's a bag. She has taken vindictive delight in shitting on Sunak's supporters when she became Prime Minister. Instead of collecting a balanced cabinet or even a balanced government, to represent all wings of the party, she thought her authority was stronger than it was. She thought she was the boss. And she made a point of humiliating the colleagues who'd backed Sunak throughout the contest. She told them there was no place for them in their government, and she told them why it was. According to Johnny Mercer, she even took particular delight in it, laughing at him as she sacked him. And this is to say nothing of the misery, the real misery, she's deliberately inflicted upon millions of people in the country with her reckless behaviour and then refusal to backtrack properly on it when it was clear it was causing misery. And it's not like she lacks empathy. Though I remember the TV debate where the host fainted and Truss was clearly alarmed, and once she'd composed herself, went over to try and help. So she doesn't lack human feeling like some of her colleagues. But I sometimes wonder does that make it worse? Because she can feel empathy and still chose to inflict pain on others. So sympathy is limited, I have to say. Also, I'm not sure how badly the stress is getting to her. She was obviously stressed in the comments there, but she conducted an interview with the BBC yesterday. And she didn't appear overly stressed there. She was still bog useless in it. Of course she was. She always is. She held a party at Downing Street for a cabinet and some other MPs last night. I mean, the optics on that are terrible. Her government has just announced austerity. They're claiming that it's necessary. Of course it's not. Austerity, like trickle-down economics, is generally regarded as nonsense. Austerity is the notion that when the national finances are squeezed, it's better to weaken the essential infrastructure of the country than it is to ask the very wealthy to contribute a little bit extra. Jeremy Hunt's banging on about compassionate conservative. We're going to make sure the most vulnerable don't suffer. Well, why are you introducing austerity then? Austerity punishes the most vulnerable. Austerity is the furthest thing from compassionate. In fact, people have been digging up an old clip of Tony Blair from years ago where he said the difference between conservatism and passionate conservatism is that passionate conservatism will say they're not going to help you, but that they're really sorry about it. But announcing austerity and then having a drinks party in Downing Street for the cabinet is a really bad look. All right, sure, it's legal this time. But what message is that giving? Is she going to try and say the cabinet have worked really hard and deserve to let their hair down a bit? Worked really hard on what? Crushing our economy? Creating the circumstances under which they now bring in austerity? I mean, I'm sure many of them are delighted about that. David Cameron admitted years later the reason he brought austerity in was to shrink the size of the state. They know it's a fiddle. I mean, when members of the Eurozone demanded austerity from Greece in return for loans, it was because it was the quickest and cleanest way for them to protect their own economies. They were acting out of self-interest. But a government is not supposed to inflict it upon itself. It's not even just a moral issue. It's a practical one. Weaker public services means a harder time for businesses to operate. Austerity is actually just another anti-growth measure from the Tories, along with Brexit, deregulation and their investment zones, which they're still going ahead with. As part of the Chancellor's statement, Tory clown John Redwood asked if we'd still be avoiding the recession. I mean, we were going to avoid the recession with the mini-budget. Are we still going to do that? We were never avoiding the recession, John. It was never happening from the moment a hard Brexit was inflicted upon us. How do you grow your economy during a global downturn while you're raising export barriers to your most important markets at the same time as you're scaling back education and training, transport networks, healthcare? You know, be sensible. We live in a world bound together into trade blocs. We're now alone as a major economy in not being part of one, and governed by the very people who thought it would be a good idea to have that situation. You know, the latest round of polling shows Labour extending their lead again. There's one mad poll where it has the Tories winning just one seat if there were to be an election tomorrow. It's not one of the pollsters I rate, so yeah, don't get too excited. But the overall trend across all polls is a large Labour lead and Liz Truss on like -70 approval rating. That's never been seen before. You know, but the Labour lead at the moment is as large as it got under Blair. And I guess the recovery in the markets might help the Tories a bit in the polls, although the announcement of austerity won't help, so I don't know where that's going to fall in terms of net effect. And people still have their smaller pension pots and higher mortgages. Those haven't gone away. Labour are now referring to that as the Tory mortgage premium. That's it now. That's what it's going to be called now. Until the election, that is what it's going to be called. And while all of this is going on, even the Tory papers can't hide the fact that Truss is Prime Minister in name only. So you would think Tory MPs need to work quickly here, because as far as the public's concerned, they don't even know who's running the country. They're fairly sure it isn't Liz Truss. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.